Who knew a man from over 2,000 years ago could impact modern society in such a significant way? Aristotle's ideologies and teachings are still passed on today regarding the art of rhetoric, natural law, and the true meaning of life. Aristotle was born in 384 BC, where he grew up in Macedonia, an area in Greece. Much remains unknown about Aristotle's earlier years, other than the death of his parents, which resulted in him growing up as an orphan. In his late teens, he moved to Athens, where he attended Plato's academy. Over the years, Aristotle composed approximately 200 pieces of written work. However, only 31 of those pieces have survived the test of time. His ideologies focused on finding a higher purpose within reality, where he focused on what he referred to as the golden mean. A virtuous person in the eyes of Aristotle follows the golden mean, balancing their vices on either end of a teeter-totter, where each virtue has a perfect balance. A man who lacks humor or any interesting aspects would fall under deficiency, while a class clown who makes jokes at anyone's expense, including his own, would be considered a buffoon and fall under excess. Now, the golden mean would describe someone who truly has a grasp at the art of making people laugh, wittiness. For every ethical dilemma, there is always a golden mean. To Aristotle, happiness wasn't just a state of mind, but rather an activity that's achieved by our ability to understand reason. Although a constant variable known as luck has an impact on one's happiness, Aristotle thought that a truly happy person was able to keep their shortcomings in perspective. For Aristotle, justice is a virtue that is practiced upon other people. He goes on to say how possessions or shares and people are equals. When an unequal amount of shares are distributed to an equal amount of people, quarrels and complaints arise. Within courthouse walls, justice involves fairness that can be either involuntarily or voluntarily. Selling, buying, lending, and interest covers voluntary justice, while murder, adultery, assault, and theft is involuntary. Whether it's a civil or criminal case, the sole purpose of a judge is to restore equality that has been lost, either by transaction or through occurrence. Simply put, justice to Aristotle is being equal and unbiased in every situation, although oftentimes that is not the case. Murder is simply murder and nothing else in his eyes, a loss of life. The act of murder is not virtuous either, as there cannot be a deficit or excess, so whether one is killing a killer or killing an innocent person, it is virtuously wrong. When discussing abortion, it is really open to interpretation on what exactly Aristotle would think in today's society. From Book 7 of the Politics, he wrote about how families could only have so many offspring and they exceeded that limit. A forced abortion must take place before sensation and feeling can develop. Now this is where his point becomes hazy. People who are pro-abortion may see it as Aristotle being accepting of abortion because embryos don't have the ability to consciously feel sensations. The one variable that always remains is that at what point does an embryo become classified as life? Regarding Aristotle's point on how an abortion can be either unholy or holy, when does a fetus develop sensation in life? Right from the get-go, when it's a little tadpole, or when it develops arms and legs? This is simply unanswerable.
Aristotle held the belief that there was a natural aristocracy, and that governments formed their laws off that natural instinct. This is where the idea of natural law comes from, a natural system of law that is essentially pre-programmed into the human psyche. Alongside his philosophy towards natural law, Aristotle, unlike his teacher Plato, who believed that the citizen was forced into following the laws by the state, believed that the citizen deserved the right to enjoy an equality-based society. Aristotle also believed that humans are social creatures, and because of this, there are a natural set of codes installed by God that teaches us what is good and what is bad naturally. He took this belief even farther, and by analyzing the laws of his time, was able to conform concepts such as empiricism, which is the belief that knowledge was derived from experiences with the senses. He believed that it was this knowledge that allowed for humans to create a moral code and translate that code into law. Aristotle's strengths in law came from his lifetime of experience in and around law. As a kid, Aristotle was surrounded by law because of his father, Nicomachus, who was the friend and physician of Anymidas III, who was king of Macedonia at the time. Aristotle spent a lot of time with Anymidas and learned from him because of his father's death. His strengths come from the fact that he affirmed the idea of natural law, but he also helped spark the creation of democracy. Aristotle's ideas surrounding republican government and the rule of law are even credited as ideals that were looked upon when the founding fathers were creating America. Also, Aristotle's views on the rule of law stated in a passage from the Politics, where law is said to be reason or intelligence, which Aristotle called nous, free from passion, and it is where the governance of God should take place. This serves as a strength because it shows how Aristotle valued laws as intelligence that shouldn't be impacted by a group or person's feelings. Finally, in regards to strengths surrounding law, Aristotle is credited frequently on the Founding Fathers in their lists of reliable and authoritative political philosophers. An example of Aristotle's weaknesses in regards to law would be his bias towards the morals of God. He has this bias towards God's way because of the era he was born into. With so many unanswerable questions, God was one of the only true answers at that time. And this is why Aristotle references him and the morals of God so much when he's discussing law. Now, religion and law isn't necessarily a weakness, because many of our laws come from religious times. But when religion uses law as a tool to enforce a belief or a mindset, that is when things get bad. Civil disobedience is defined as the refusal to comply with certain laws or to pay taxes and fines as a peaceful form of political protest. Now the question stands: would Aristotle support the idea of civil disobedience? Personally, we think yes. Aristotle would have supported the idea of civil disobedience. This is because he holds the belief that laws are derived from natural law. So, if the current laws don't fit the ideas of natural law, it is likely that Aristotle would have supported the idea of standing up against the law in protest. Another reason that Aristotle would be in favor of civil disobedience is because one of his ideas regarding democracy. This idea is credited as a source used by the founders of America. It is the idea that pure democracy can easily turn into tyranny of the majority. This means that when left unchecked, a pure democracy can grow into an oppressive force used by the majority of a government on the minorities it controls. Because of this belief, it is safe to assume that Aristotle would be in support of a minority standing up against a law put in place by the majority. If said law was in any sense tyrannical or oppressive on the natural laws, this is where the main conflict would begin.
In conclusion, Aristotle was an amazing man who lived a fascinating life because he made it that way for himself. He was ahead of his time with his ideologies, and while studying broad ideas like justice, virtues, and laws. Although he may have walked the earth over 2,000 years ago, his footsteps still leave ripples even in today's modern world.